So this will be fun. And typically I do most of my workshops, I'll usually open up with like the bad news, like the catastrophic state of how horrible everything is. But today I'm going to change it up and give you guys a little bit of good news. So diabetes is 100% preventable and it's 100% reversible to a point. So there is a point at which the metabolism gets so broken and so impaired and so bombarded and toxic and deficient that it just can't be repaired. So whether you are here because you have type 2 diabetes, or you're here because you have fatigue or headaches or arthritis, or you have weight gain that you can't seem to lose, or your hormones are out of whack, or headaches, migraines, we'll talk about how this really applies to everything. So, and we'll show you the steps to actually reverse this if that's possible in your case. So a lot has changed in the last 65 years, as you guys well know, and most of you guys were alive when that picture was taken in 1960. And we've seen just a catastrophic increase in really every chronic disease that you could name, from obesity to diabetes. It's now 74% of Americans are either overweight or obese, and over 50% of American adults are either pre-diabetic or are diabetic. And do you think that was the case 63 years ago or 65 years ago? No. Because when I was a kid, diabetes, there was two kinds of diabetes when I was a kid, and they're still the same today. But when I was a kid, they called it juvenile onset diabetes, and they called it adult onset diabetes. Well, they quit doing that. Now they call it type 1 and type 2 because so many children are developing adult onset diabetes. So we're not only getting sicker and sicker, but it's happening at younger and younger ages. And they're actually renaming disease because it's happening at younger ages, and now we're just getting sicker by the moment. So that's really the state of where we're at. And when you look at some of the data around this statistic, or these statistics, it's 6.8. This is a study done with 55,000 people over 20 years. Very well done study, probably the best of its kind. And they found, and it ended in 2018, they found that 6.8% of Americans had optimal cardiometabolic health. So that's literally, essentially 7% of Americans are in good metabolic shape. So it's more than 9 out of 10 people have a broken, dysfunctional, impaired cardiometabolic system. And again, was that the case in 1960? And the answer to that is obviously no. So about 2 years ago, there was a doctor from Harvard. Her name is Dr. Fatima Stanford. She was on 60 Minutes, and she's an obesity specialist. She works for UMass Hospital, and she's on staff at Harvard. And she said this on TV while the cameras were rolling, that obesity and diabetes have nothing to do with genetics. Has nothing to do with lifestyle. It's purely genetic. That all this obesity crisis that we deal with is purely just genetic. And you can make a small marginal change with lifestyle changes or whatever. That's a tiny piece of the pie. But the real issue is bad genes. Well, there is no such thing as a genetic epidemic. You don't get an epidemic of anything based on genes because genes take so long to change. So even the current mainstream medical mantra is you've got diabetes, or you got high blood sugar, or your A1C is too high, or you're pre-diabetic, and there's just nothing you can do about it, and just take these pills. And about 2 years ago, they finally classified obesity as an actual disease. And the reason they finally did that is because when you classify something as a disease, you get a thing called an ICD-10 code that the doctors can use to put into your chart, and then they can use medications or drugs that are approved to treat that condition. So it's really just a workaround to get Big Pharma involved on this picture. We're going to uncover that a little more later. So this is sort of the way cellular metabolism works. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but basically we eat food, goes into our mouth, whether it's good food, bad food, or indifferent. But when you eat food, you put it in your mouth, goes down the throat, gets into the stomach, then goes into the intestines. And that top left picture is the intestinal wall or the intestinal mucosa. And then the bacteria that's in our gut will do what's called fermentation, where they break down what are called short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids will travel to various organs like the brain and to the adipose tissue and to the muscle and to the liver and to the pancreas. And it basically stimulates energy in all of those organs. And then the other pathway is when we eat sugar or carbohydrates, it goes into our intestinal system. It travels through the intestine into the bloodstream, and then with the more sugar that's in the blood, the pancreas recognizes that, and then in response it secretes a thing called insulin. And you guys have probably heard of insulin, but your body's secreting insulin to take that sugar out of the bloodstream and get it into the cell. And when it goes into the actual cell, it goes into the mitochondria, which then produces ATP or energy. It's basically how the energy system works. But if we have too much sugar in the bloodstream for too long, then our insulin receptors start to desensitize. So we're basically down-regulating the number of our insulin receptors, so then it takes more and more to get that into the cell and use for energy. And because you can't use it for energy, now it's being shuttled into the fat cells, into the muscle, which we'll talk about. So that's really the kind of third grade explanation of how the science of blood sugar works. And then, so if you kind of look at almost like a pyramid, at the top of the pyramid you have full-blown type 2 diabetes. That's sort of the peak of the triangle. Underneath that you would have prediabetes, and we'll talk about what the numbers look like with that. And then under that you would have a thing called metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome leads to prediabetes and then also eventually leads to type 2 diabetes. So there's 5 different markers that indicate whether or not someone has metabolic syndrome, and it's visceral obesity, so that's too much fat, mainly around the waist or the belly. And then you have hypertension, and we'll talk about how the ideal numbers for hypertension is still 120/80. And a lot of people go to their doctor, and as long as you're less than 130/85 or 135/85, then you're fine. But all the data is very clear. You want to be as close to that 120/80 or even slightly less in order to be optimally healthy. And then insulin resistance, and then high triglycerides and low HDL. And people know that as the good cholesterol, which there's really no such thing as good or bad cholesterol. Your body makes it, so it's not good or bad. It's just responding to your lifestyle or what we're doing to our bodies. So again, the pyramid, at the top we have type 2 diabetes, we have prediabetes, we have metabolic syndrome, and then underneath that we have a thing called metabolic dysfunction. That's sort of like the pre-diabetes, which, by the way, is what that 7% of Americans that are healthy, the other 93% suffer from some degree of metabolic dysfunction. So it's basically every one of us, and we'll show you how to reverse that. And the conditions related to metabolic dysfunction, brain issues, neurological and cognitive, so things like Alzheimer's and dementia, which they're now actually calling type 3 diabetes. Has anyone ever heard that? That's the new mantra around Alzheimer's and dementia. It's diabetes of the brain is essentially what that is. Cognitive decline or mild cognitive impairment is caused by metabolic dysfunction, depression and anxiety. And you look at the cardiovascular system, you have hypertension and high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease, heart attacks and strokes. And then your blood sugar and endocrine issues are type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, and insulin resistance like we talked about. And then weight related, you have obesity, visceral, that belly fat accumulation, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which, by the way, in 1960, you would never see a case of fatty liver disease unless it was in a severe alcoholic. Like, they didn't exist unless they were a raging alcoholic. And now we see it all the time, and the majority of the cases don't even drink, or maybe never even drank, and that's the relation to blood sugar. And then metabolic syndrome, and wait, there's more. Any inflammatory and or autoimmune condition is driven by metabolic dysfunction. So you have chronic inflammation, which we know is the underlying driver of every chronic disease that we worry about, gout, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, and then fill in the blank arthritis. Anything that has the word itis in it is inflammatory in nature and involves the joints. So psoriatic arthritis, Sjogren's disease, they all have an inflammatory component. So, well, let me get through this. I'll come to that. Some of the other conditions are cancer And there's about a dozen cancers that are involved or driven or caused by metabolic dysfunction. Breast, colorectal, and pancreatic are the three main. By the way, too, cancer is what's called an obligate glucose metabolizer, which means cancer cells love sugar. Their primary fuel source is sugar. They can really only survive on sugar, and every one of you in this room already know that already. Because have you ever heard of a PET scan? You know what a PET scan is? So when you go to your oncologist, they're looking for cancer, they'll do what's called a PET scan, and they will inject dye into your veins. It's a radiographic tag on a dextrose molecule. So they basically take a sugar molecule and they put a radiographic tag on it and they inject it into you, and they wait about 45 minutes and they want to see where the dye and where the sugar is collecting. And because cancer loves sugar, the cancer will basically gobble up the sugar and collect where the tumor is. So even modern oncology knows that sugar drives cancer, but yet you go get your chemo, you go get your radiation, and there's a big candy bowl sitting on the front desk, or you drink your Ensure, or you get some orange juice, which is pure sugar. So they're giving you the foods that drive the cancer. And then sleep apnea, infertility. Infertility rates, by the way, are getting worse at about 1% a year. This is record infertility. We've never seen anything like it at any point in history. And you can gauge the health of a species by its ability to reproduce. If you go to the zoo and the giraffes aren't reproducing, then you realize that there's something critically dangerous about the health of that species. But for some reason with humans, we think, oh, it's no big deal, right? But we're just animals. We are wild animals, but we live in captivity. And we're the only animals, by the way, because we're in the animal kingdom. We're just another animal, but we're the only animals that suffer from any kind of chronic disease. Name another wild animal that suffers from obesity or diabetes or cancer or heart disease or any other chronic disease, unless they become house cats or they become dogs that live in our house, and then they get cancer and they get obesity and they get liver problems and kidney issues just like everybody else. If you took a monkey out of the jungle and you put him in Franklin, and you took him out of his natural environment, put him in Franklin, and you gave him a desk job, so in the morning on his way to his job, he would get a Starbucks latte and a Frappuccino and a scone, and then for lunch he would sit at his desk and he would eat a cheeseburger with French fries and then drive home in stressful traffic and flipping people off on the way home, and then at night he would eat a big bowl of pasta and sit on the couch and watch Netflix. What happens to the health of that animal? Does he get healthier or sicker? Yeah, how many times out of 1,000 does he get sicker? 1,000 out of 1,000. So what's the solution? Do you take that animal to the doctor, take that monkey to Vanderbilt and say, well, he's going to need an antidepressant because he's depressed and anxious. He's probably going to need Ozempic because he's gaining too much weight. We're going to have to get him on a proton pump inhibitor because now he's got gastric reflux, and then maybe some pain medication because his joints ache. Or would you put that monkey back in his natural environment and live the way that God designed him to live? So somehow we've sort of disconnected ourselves that we're different from those other animals when we're basically just the same. Hormone imbalances. Do you guys know what the master hormone is in the body? The body's master hormone?
Vitamin D.
That is a precursor, very important to vitamin D. It's insulin. Insulin is your body's master hormone. So in order for you to regulate your testosterone levels and your estrogen levels and progesterone levels and thyroid stimulating hormone, in order to have all those other hormones in range, you have to fix insulin first. Because if your insulin's out of balance, if you're insulin sensitive or insulin resistant, then you're just not going to have healthy other hormonal function downstream. Kidney disease, fatigue, and we could probably put 15 other diseases, fibromyalgia, there's tons of other diseases. Basically every chronic disease we worry about is linked to metabolic dysfunction. Have a good night. Thank you. So the key is if we can fix that, we can basically fix every chronic disease. And it's simple, but it's not easy. And I will tell you that. This is to fix this is way simpler than most people think, but it's not. I'm not going to say that it's easy. So this is from Tufts University's nutrition department. which, by the way, is government funded. They get about 80% of their annual budget directly from big food, big agriculture, big food, and endorsed by the NIH. So our good friend Tony Fauci was a big part of that whole study. But what they did was they put foods on a chart and they ranked them from things you want to minimize in the red to yellow, which is to be moderated, and then in the green are things that you want to eat and encourage and eat more and more of. So if you see at the bottom, ground beef is like the worst of the worst, which is insane, by the way, because healthy beef from a healthy animal is one of the healthiest foods you can ever put in your body. It's got all the essential amino acids, it's got conjugated linoleic acid, it has tons of prebiotics. It's one of the healthiest foods, not prebiotics, but it's one of the healthiest foods you can get. So ground beef and whole egg fried in butter, you want to avoid those. And then poached eggs are on that bottom list too. But then you have things like Lucky Charms, which are moderated. Like you don't have to avoid them, just moderate Lucky Charms. And then you have things like Frosted Mini Wheats is just right up there with kale and non-fat frozen yogurt, watermelon, like one of the healthiest foods you can eat. And this is real. Like how can we trust anything these people say when they put garbage like that out into the public? And again, it's fully funded by big food and big agriculture. So this is what we're dealing with. So if you go to your doctor, if you go to a doctor that just gives you prescription medications and your doctor doesn't ask you about your nutrition and your food and your sleep and your exercise routine and how you deal with stress, and all they do is give you prescriptions, you don't go to a doctor. You go to a drug dealer. And that may be hard to hear that, but that is the reality. All they're doing is doling out drugs. And again, there's a time and a place for medications. They serve a purpose, no doubt about that. But if they're just giving you drugs and not addressing anything in regards to your lifestyle, then you're literally going to a drug dealer. And the other part of this is if they give you recommendations of what to eat, could you design a better nutrition program in the hospital? Yes or yes? Has anyone ever been to the hospital? You see that garbage they give you, like those powdered mashed potatoes with that gross gravy and that pork chop looking thing, and then the Jell-O, and then it's like they're trying, the goal of that should be trying to get you to the morgue as quick as they can. Like they're literally, it almost seems like it's intentional. It's changing, it's getting slightly better. It's, the new administration, the MAHA movement is helping, but it's at a snail's pace. We're going to get food dyes out of the food, but they've got 7 years to get rid of them, right? So they're going to give a little bit and then they're going to take. They're not going to put themselves out of business because food companies and pharmaceutical companies care about one thing and one thing only: money. Do you know that drug companies function by the clinical definition of a psychopath? If you look up the definition of psychopathy of a psychopath, drug companies fit that definition to a T. They are for profit. They care about themselves over anything else. They're profit motivated. They do tremendous amounts of harm. They tend to cover it up and lie and cheat and steal and work around. They're basically all convicted felons, from Pfizer to Merck to Sanofi Pasteur to every one of those companies. They've all been sued in federal court. They're all convicted felons. And then we rely on them to make our health decisions. And the FDA, by the way, gets about 40% of their annual budget directly from Big Pharma. The fox is guarding the hen house. So if you've ever heard me talk, I say this all the time. So if you're going to be healthy, you have to turn off your GPS. So if you're consistently eating foods out of the G, P, and S category, then your GPS is set for cancer and diabetes and obesity and heart disease and pulmonary issues, Alzheimer's and dementia, arthritis, basically every disease we worry about, because these 3 food categories drive a thing called inflammation. And that inflammation is part of that metabolic dysfunction. So the G stands for grains. And these are largely the processed grains, and it's the overconsumption of these grains which is the big problem. And grains are bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, chips, pretzels, cookies, bagels, muffins, pastries, corn chips, donuts, all the fun stuff, right? It's basically all the things that we love to eat that are so yummy, they give us that mouth pleasure, So it's the overconsumption of those things while we have metabolic dysfunction that's driving the inflammatory process. Because if you eat bread, how quickly does that bread turn to mush?
Instantly.
Almost instantly. Like before it gets halfway down your throat, that bread has already turned into sugar. That starchy carbohydrate that you eat, the amylase, the enzyme in our saliva, turns that carbohydrate into a simple sugar almost instantaneously. But whole wheat's good, right? That's the healthy bread. Have you ever heard of the glycemic index? Some of you probably heard this. It's how quickly something raises your blood sugar. What's higher on the glycemic index, whole wheat bread or a Snickers bar?
Whole wheat bread.
Whole wheat bread. Whole wheat bread turns to sugar, raises your blood sugar faster than a Snickers bar does. Now, I'm not advocating Snickers bar consumption. That's not the point. And then the other one would be white bread and table sugar. Which one turns to sugar, raises blood sugar faster, white bread or table sugar?
White bread.
White bread. And you can look that up. So we get up in the morning and we have our pancakes, or we have our bowl of cereal, or we have our bagel, and then for lunch we do our sandwich and our chips, and then for dinner we do our pasta and our pizza and all the other carb. And we just eat carbs throughout the day, and then we wonder why we're tired all the time, and we have these skin issues, and we're fatigued, and we have headaches, and now I've got a cancer diagnosis, and now we're literally driving ourselves directly into that problem. Carbonated, that's right. And then the P is your processed foods and processed seed oils. Processed foods are obvious. Everybody knows that if you're eating a bunch of processed food, that's not going to be good for us. If you get your dinner from a bag that's handed to you through a window, probably not the best ideal dinner, more than likely. So that's the processed food. And the processed seed oils are the vegetable oils, and the corn oil, and the sunflower oil, and the safflower oil, and the canola oil. Those are all those bad toxic oils that literally get incorporated into our cell membranes. Because when you eat a bad seed oil, you don't pee it out. It gets incorporated into your cells. And it takes months for your body to get rid of that toxic fat that's been incorporated into the cell. But see, people say, well, canola, that's what my cardiologist told me to eat. Do you know where canola oil comes from? It's rapeseed. It's genetically modified rapeseed oil. It's not a corn. They put a little ear of corn thing on the bottle, but it's not corn. It's rapeseed oil. So they take rapeseed, which is completely inedible, and they press it through a machine into this nasty sludge that stinks so bad they have to deodorize it and then bleach it with hexane, which is a known carcinogen. And then by the time it reaches our shelf, it's already basically an omega-6 trans fat processed seed oil. But you will see the American Heart Association stamp of approval literally on the side of the bottle. How do you think they get away with that? They pay for it. It's an endorsement. If they pay enough money, they can stick that on the Lucky Charms, on the Frosted Mini Wheats, on a Twinkie for all I know. Just about any product, as long as they pay to play, they can put that stamp of approval on anything. So when we're moving away from these seed oils, the best to cook with is really at low temperatures, butter and olive oil, your cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, regular grass-fed butter. Can I get an amen for butter and eggs? Amen. That's what I had for lunch today. Amen. And then at high temperatures, we prefer coconut oil and avocado oil. Those are my two favorites. Now their flash temperature is really high. You don't want to heat butter up too high. You don't want to heat olive oil up too high, because when it smokes, it's rancid. So once it smokes up to that, or reaches that flash temperature, you've turned that good healthy fat into a bad fat. And then the S, what do you think the S stands for?
Sugar. Seed oil.
Nope, strawberries. No. Sugar. Yeah, good old-fashioned sugar. Yeah, sugar is the one we want to avoid. Now, at the turn of the 19th century, early 1900s, we were consuming about 10 pounds of sugar per person per year. What do you think it is now? How many pounds was that?
40.
Keep going. He said 40, 50, keep going. You got to go up way faster. We're going to be here all day. It's about 150 pounds, 147 pounds of sugar per person per year in the United States. but we're all just obese and sick because of bad genetics. Like, give me a break. So nobody believes that once they see the numbers. So the real key, the holy grail, I guess, if you will, is a thing called metabolic flexibility. It's the ability for your body to use glucose or sugar when it needs to or when it's available, and then it can switch to fat for fuel or ketones when the sugar or the carbs is unavailable. And you want to be able to be flexible between the two of those. And if you can maintain or gain a thing called metabolic flexibility, that eliminates metabolic dysfunction. That's how you fix it. You fix metabolic dysfunction and metabolic syndrome and prediabetes and regular diabetes by maintaining a thing called metabolic flexibility. And the beautiful thing is, when you get to a point of metabolic flexibility, you can have a piece of cheesecake. You can have a burger with fries. You can have some pizza. You can have a little bit of whatever you want because your body's flexible enough to flip-flop back and forth. The problem is most Americans, 93% of Americans, are pegged to that sugar-burning, glucose-dominant sugar burners, essentially. So how do we do that? So there's a thing, one of the tools or one of the keys is a thing called intermittent fasting. Has anyone ever heard of intermittent fasting or done intermittent fasting? I call it privileged starvation. It's my bad joke. But it's basically periods of time where you don't eat, so your body has a chance to tap into stored fat for fuel, and then when you start eating again, it can use the carbs and then switch back to fat, and then use the carbs and switch back to fat. So it generally takes, for most people, it takes about 10 hours, 10 to 12 hours of not eating, sometimes more like 14 to 16 hours for some people, to get into that intermittent fasted state where you're using ketones for fuel. Because remember, when you eat food, you eat any kind of food, your body's going to store that first in the liver. Whatever it doesn't need or can't use, it's going to store directly to the liver. The liver can only hold so much, so whatever is in excess is going to be kicked over into the fat cells. So if you want to keep your body metabolically flexible, you don't want to overfill the liver and dump into fat cells. So the effects of intermittent fasting in the blood, you decrease insulin, you decrease IGF-1, insulin growth factor 1, leptin, and increase your ketones, adiponectin, and ghrelin, which is a satiation hormone. It's a hormone that tells you to stop eating, essentially. Liver, you increase your insulin sensitivity, ketone body production, which is those little broken down fat molecules that your body can use for fuel, and decreases IGF-1. In the intestines, it reduces energy uptake, reduces inflammation, and it reduces cellular proliferation. What does cellular proliferation, that's too many cells in the intestine, what do you think that is also known as?
Colon cancer.
Colon cancer. A polyp would be the first sign of that, and then the next sign would be colon cancer. In the brain, it improves cognitive function, increases neurotropic factors, increased stress resistance, and reduces inflammation. In the heart, it reduces the resting heart rate, blood pressure, increases stress resistance. And then in fat cells, it helps you to basically liberate the fat from the cell to use as fuel, which is known as lipolysis, reduces leptin, increased adiponectin, and then reduces inflammation. And you see that theme across a lot of these is you're decreasing inflammation, you're decreasing inflammation. Now, the way I prefer to do intermittent fasting is I do basically a 16-8 or an 18-6. So 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating. So you eat in an 8-hour window. And for some people, they need to tighten that down to more like a 6-hour window. But we got to give our bodies a chance to kind of catch up and use what's in the muscles and in the liver in order to get into those fat stores. But the problem is we eat dinner at 7 o'clock. And in the morning, we get up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, we start eating again, then we have lunch, then we have dinner, and we're just always on that cycle of never giving our bodies a break. The way I typically do it is I'll eat my breakfast at about noon or 1 o'clock. It's kind of the average. That's my break fast or breakfast. You're breaking your fast at breakfast. And then I do coffee in the morning and then water with those electrolytes that we carry. And I feel fantastic. And then when it's time to eat, I'm not really hungry because my body's running on those ketones or that fat. I'm just kind of eating because it's time to eat. And I want to get my protein requirement in that little window. And then I eat at 1 o'clock, let's say, and then I'll try to finish around 7 or 8. And that's basically what I do 6 days a week. And then on Sunday, we do Cinnamon Roll Sunday. So 1 day a week, you kind of let it rip, let the wheels fall off, and then get back on track on Monday. Because the key with intermittent fasting is it's intermittent. You don't want to do it all the time. Your body adapts to it. You want to kind of keep your body guessing. And for some people, intermittent fasting could look like what's called an OMAD. It's called 1 meal a day, OMAD, O-M-A-D. So basically just eat dinner and that's it. Or some people need to do like a 3-day water fast to kind of get the ball rolling. The associate doctor I used to have, he did 14 days. 14-day water fast. He did water, coffee, and electrolytes for 14 days. I'm not that brave or insane. I've done 3 days before, and I will tell you, when you get through those first couple of days, which are usually the roughest, by day 3, 4, 5, or 6, I mean, you're cruising. You're not hungry. It's like lights are brighter, the brain fog is gone, you have more energy, you sleep better. It's like a different fuel source is tapped into in the body, because sugar or glucose is diesel fuel and ketones are like jet fuel. It burns cleaner, energizes the system so much better. So there's multiple ways to do intermittent fasting. For most people, the best way to do it is just push your breakfast. Instead of eating at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, don't eat till lunch, and then try to wrap it up at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. It's really that simple. And that way, when you have your 1 day a week cheat meal or your cheat day, you're not kicking your body right back where you started. You're able to recover, rebound, and bounce back and get back on the intermittent fasting. Because I am not going to live a life where I could never eat cheesecake or Miss Norma's cake or birthday cake. Or my daughter got baptized on Sunday, so we had a big spread, Mexican food. We had this big cake from Puffy Muffin. It's second only to Miss Norma's cakes. Miss Norma's made me like 9 cakes. How many of you made? Like 3, I think, something like that. So anyway, it allows you to live. It allows you to live 80-20, 80% healthy, 20% Southern. That's the ideal. That was a joke. All right, so the traditional medical approach to obesity and diabetes and weight loss in general are a category of medications or drugs called GLP-1 agonists. Now, I'm not totally against these things. I think they have value. They're things like semaglutide is one name. You have Ozempic, Wegovy, which is the weight loss version of that. Tirzepatide, Mounjaro, Trulicity, Byetta, Victoza, Rybelsus. There's more coming out every single day. But they basically work by the same mechanism. They slow down the conveyor belt from your mouth to your toilet. That slows that process down, so it allows you to become more satiated, so you're not as hungry. Now, I will say, if you are 400 pounds, you can't get out of your house, do whatever you got to do. Full-blown diabetic, your A1C's in the double digits, you got to do something because you're on death's doorstep. So if that's the mechanism to get you started, great. The problem is, and I'll get to this in just a second. So some of the pros of this, you're going to have less hunger, you're going to lose weight for sure, and then there's going to be no effort. Other than sticking a plunger into your leg, there's really no effort involved. And then the cons are vomiting, constipation, and or diarrhea. Most people get a little bit of both, so you get the double whammy. Pancreatitis, which can be fatal in some cases. Gastroparesis, bowel obstruction, gallstone attacks, bile duct blockage, lowers your basal metabolic rate, which is how many calories you burn per day doing nothing. It's like how hot your metabolism runs. So it lowers the amount of calories you burn per day doing nothing. And then you'll lose lean muscle mass. Because what most people don't realize with those medications, especially if you get to like a year of using them, 60%, up to 60% of the weight loss is going to be bone, muscle, or connective tissue. So you're getting thinner, but you're actually getting fatter. Does that make sense? Because you're losing bone, you're losing muscle, you're losing joint and cartilage, you're losing healthy, lean tissue, but your scale looks better, and you look better with your clothes on, I guess. But then you notice people over time, they kind of get that melted candle wax looking face because you lose a lot of the fat out of your face. They're emaciated, and once you start that drug, guess when you're told to stop it? Never. Yeah, it's a life sentence. Because the minute you come off those medications, now you're dealing with less muscle and less bone and a lower basal metabolic rate. So the minute you come off those medications, guess what's going to happen to your weight? Skyrockets. What a beautiful drug for the drug companies. They love it. And the other part of it is it's very expensive. But my insurance covers it. My Medicare pays for it. Great. That means I get to pay for it, right? So somebody pays the bill. It's not free. It's not a $20 copay. Somebody's paying for that medication. And you know now that is considered to be the first line of defense for obesity as young as 6 years old. So now they're trying to get this pushed in younger and younger and younger ages. And again, once that kid starts that medication, they're going to be on it for the rest of their life, more than likely. And most people, it's about 38% of people by the 1 year mark will have to stop the medication because of the side effects. I had a lady that was just in here an hour ago. Her doctor accidentally put her on 7 milligrams instead of the 2 milligrams. They messed up her prescription. So after 5 shots of that, she was so nauseous and vomiting, diarrhea. She had basically every one of those except for pancreatitis. But she was just so deathly sick that she was like, I will deal with those 40 extra pounds before I'm going to live that way. And she's been off of it now for 2 months, and she still doesn't feel good. She still gets nauseous when she eats, and she's maintained her weight loss because she can't eat. But she's losing muscle, she's losing bone. So these drugs can be used if they would titrate you up, if they would microdose you from the very beginning, instead of 2 milligrams, do like 0.5 milligrams to start. Do that for a couple of months, and then slowly raise it up, and then slowly titrate it down. I could see some value in that, but that's not how they do it. And there's no magic fixes. There's no solutions. There's only trade-offs. And that really goes with everything. There's no real solutions. There's only just trade-offs. Like exercise is not really a solution. It's a trade-off because you still got to go to the gym. You still got to work out. You still got to be consistent. Eating healthy is not really the solution. It's a trade-off. Because you still got to shop better, cook better, prepare better, avoid the bad foods. But it's just which trade-offs are you willing to live with? That's the question. So this is, I know this is groundbreaking, but we just got to start eating food by God. I know, it's so hard to comprehend that we just got to start eating real food. Protein, veggies, and fruit. Like it's not that complicated. Your protein is your beef, chicken, lamb, turkey, deer, eggs, fish, pork even. A little bit of pork's fine. So just real animal-based foods. And then veggies, preferably above ground veggies, the ones that grow above the ground, not the tubers like the potatoes and the carrots and things like that. And then fruits. And your best fruits would be berries. So anything that ends in berry, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, whatever other berries there are out there. And then lemons, limes, avocados, and Granny Smith apples. Why would we pick Granny Smith over regular apples? The sugar. Yeah.
Those the green ones?
Yeah, the green ones have far less sugar. Yeah. And with your fruits and veggies, always try to get, organic if possible, but only on the things that if they spray the pesticide and it lands on the part of the fruit or the vegetable that you directly eat, you want to try to get that organic when you can. Because if you're eating the apple that was sprayed by the pesticide, then you're going to be eating the pesticide. If you're getting bananas, they're spraying the banana, you're peeling off the exterior, don't worry about getting that organic. It's kind of a waste of money. Unless you're eating the outside of the banana, then we got bigger issues to deal with. But then like cantaloupe, watermelon, things that you peel off, don't worry about buying those organic. Does that make sense? So protein, fruit and veggies, nuts and seeds, berries and beans, herbs and spices, omega-3s. That's my little rhyme. I've trademarked that so nobody steal that. So it's basically just real food, right? Getting away from the processed food, getting back to real food. And the other big piece of this is movement. Because one of the best ways you can reset the insulin receptors and use your muscles, because your muscle is a storage facility for excess glucose. So when you eat too much sugar, too much carbs, too much processed food, your body uses muscle to basically store that excess glucose. And it's your metabolic engine. I had some notes here I want to make sure I covered. Yeah, so it improves insulin sensitivity, decreased risk of diabetes, and there's different ways you can do that. You can do strength training, which I highly recommend everybody do at some point. Some people aren't ready for strength training, they just need to start with walking. And kind of the way to think through this, if you can get to where you're able to walk 8,000 steps a day, let's set that as a marker. At that point, we need to start adding in some resistance training. And then it's just only has to be 3 days a week, and you can do it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So if you're doing 3 days a week, 1 day a week, you do your pushing movements. So you do like some push-ups on a countertop, or push-ups on your knees, or regular push-ups if you can. And then on your pulling day, so push, pull, and squat, that's kind of the way to do this. The pulling movements would be like a rowing motion. You get one dumbbell and pull, you do a bent over row, or you get some bands and pull down from a door frame. And then the squatting movement would be like air squats, use a chair, lunges, any kind of hip hinging type movements. And then 2 days a week, go for a long walk, maybe do like a class if you like to do classes. So the walking, yoga, Pilates, and then the strength training is a well-rounded approach. But we know, and this is all the research is pointing in this direction, that muscle mass is the key to healthy longevity. If you want to be healthy in your 80s, you better be kicking butt in your 60s. If you want to avoid Alzheimer's and dementia in your 90s, you better be strong and lean and healthy in your 70s. Because all these problems that we deal with, from cancer to diabetes to Alzheimer's and dementia, they all started 20 or 30 years prior to that condition. And then just moving after you eat. One of the best things you can do if you eat a bad meal, big thing of pizza or pasta or whatever else, go take a walk. Earn that bad meal, right? If you ate a really bad meal, then just walk a little bit longer. Like, that's a good place to start, because it shuttles that glucose in the blood that you just ate from the pasta, and it gets it right into the muscle versus getting stored into fat and then screwing up the metabolic system. So it's really that simple. The other key piece of this is stress. And one of the best ways to deal with stress is to make sure that we're getting good sleep. Sleep is huge. If there's one thing that I could get most people to fix, like start here, it would be fix your sleep. Because when we're asleep is when our repair system happens, growth hormone surges, all of our other hormones reset at night, your digestive system is kind of resetting. So for sleep, we recommend what's called the 3-2-1 rule. So 3, 2, and 1, 3 hours before bed, no food, 2 hours before bed, no work, and 1 hour before bed, no screens. Phew, that's the hard one. I like the earbud in my ear while I'm listening to the Bible or whatever, while I'm trying to sleep. So I'm trying to get away from the screens, but I still got to have my earbud, which is probably causing brain cancer. But, it's better than staring at a screen all day. So 3, 2, 1, kind of do that little, and try to get up in the morning at the same time every morning. Like if you get up at 6 a.m., try to get up at 6 or 6:30 on Saturdays and Sundays. Don't get up at 6 on Monday and then sleep till noon on Sunday. That screws up our rhythm. And one of the best things you can do if you're an insomniac and you deal with problems with sleep, first thing in the morning, go outside on your front porch or back porch, wherever the sun comes up, and as the sun is coming up over the horizon, stare directly at it for 5 to 10 minutes. With no glasses on, no contacts, no windshield, just your eyes staring directly at the sun. And people say, well, the sun's going to burn out my eyes if I do that. That's an old wives' tale, and it's at such a low angle. There's no UVA, there's very little UVB, you're not hurting your eyes, but those photoreceptive cones in the eyeball talk to the brain, or the part of the brain called the occipital cortex, and it stimulates a melatonin cycle in the body about 16 hours later. So when you stare at the sun in the morning, you're stimulating the release of melatonin 16 hours later. That's one of the best things that we can do. And then at night, before you go to bed, take your shower. If you shower at night, take your shower before you go to bed, and the last 30 seconds to a minute of your shower, crank that thing down as cold as you can stand it for about 30 seconds to a minute. She's out. She's leaving. No way. Start it just a little cold, where it's It doesn't have to be miserable. Or you can make it cold and just stick your head under it. You don't even have to get the rest of your body. Well, you can cheat that way. But then what that forces you to do, because people say, well, that's going to wake me up. Why would I do that right before I go to sleep? Well, it's forcing your body to heat your body temperature back up, which stimulates some of that sleep cycle. Keep your room cold, no lights, make it completely dark in your room as much as you can. We even try to cover up the smoke detector light and the little thing on the TV, and I don't want any light coming through the cracks of the doors, because your brain senses that light and it prevents you from getting in that deep sleep cycle. Chronic stress. We know chronic stress releases a hormone called cortisol. That is a stress response hormone, which actually is amazing and works really good. And we need cortisol because if a tiger jumps out from behind a tree to eat you, you better be able to release a lot of cortisol because you got to get away. The problem is we're releasing cortisol driving to work, talking to our spouse, putting our kids to bed, staring at the computer, doom scrolling on Instagram, we're just cortisol surging all day long. And one of the best ways to deal with that is, number one, is chiropractic care. And the way that plays into this, if you look at the human nervous system, which you are your nervous system is what has to deal with whatever the stressor is. Whether that stressor is a tiger trying to eat you, or your mother-in-law yelling at you, or the tax bill just came due, whatever that stress is, your brain is what has to process that. And we have two halves to our nervous system. We have a sympathetic, parasympathetic. Has anyone ever heard of these? So the sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight. That's what kind of gets you out of trouble, dilates the pupils, shunts the blood into your extremities, kind of gets your body ready to move. And then you have the parasympathetic side of the nervous system, which is rest, repair, healing. Just like the sugar and the fat, most people are pegged toward that sympathetic dominant side of the nervous system. I'm convinced since COVID, everybody leaves their house at about a 6 out of 10. They're already halfway there. They've already yelled at their spouse, they've kicked the dog. By the time they get in their car into traffic and then fight through traffic, they're already revved up to the max. So the best thing with chiropractic care is it helps to push your body toward that parasympathetic side of the nervous system. When you do an adjustment, the brain is communicating to the body, to the organs, to the muscles through the nervous system, and where your spine is out of alignment, it's creating interference to that line of communication. So by restoring that line of communication, removing the interference, your body's able to heal and regulate, trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, stimulates the vagus nerve, so now your cortisol can go down, your blood pressure goes down, and then your sleep cycles can be more regulated. So it's not just about neck and back pain. I used to think chiropractic was just stiff necks and sore backs. If your neck hurt, you go, or your back hurts, you go. That is such tip of the iceberg. That's like having a car that you only use for the radio. If you're just using chiropractic for neck and back pain, then you're using a tenth of what it's capable of. Because only about 9% of your nervous system can even detect pain. So by the time you're in pain, the wheels are already falling off. The other part of that would be breath work. Has anyone ever done any breath work, breathing exercises? So there's a one that I prefer. There's tons of them out there. There's the Wim Hof method. There's all kinds of different ones. I prefer the box breathing. Has anyone ever heard of box breathing? So you imagine you got a box, and it's 4, 4, 4, and 4. So you take a breath in, 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, and you let it out for 4 seconds, and you hold that for 4 seconds. So in, hold, out, hold, in, hold, out. So 4, 4, 4, 4, and you do that 4 times. And do it 4 times a day, just to keep it consistent. By the way, too, part of the whole misalignment of the spine issue, sit up real tall, like the way Mama taught you, and take a big deep breath in through your nose. Remember how much how much lung expansion you got. Now stick your head way out in front of you, and now take a big deep breath. So you're going to lose at least 40 to 60% of your lung capacity when your head starts to translate forward. If you were to measure your arm range of motion, you've got pretty good range of motion here. When your head comes out, you're limited in range of motion. When your head goes forward, your blood pressure increases, cortisol surges. Everything changes when your head starts to translate forward. I used to think all these problems were caused by the 3 T's: toxins, trauma, and thoughts. which kind of makes sense, right? Trauma, you have like car accidents and falls and injuries and sports accidents that can cause misalignments. You have thoughts or bad emotional health where you're like walking around depressed all day. And then toxins like bad food, bad air, phthalates, chemicals. Well, there's a fourth T that's come along in the last 20 years, and that's technology. Because now we spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day staring at our phone, typing on the laptop. Our head is literally held forward, and your head weighs as much as a bowling ball. Your head is about the weight of a bowling ball. So you should hold your bowling ball here. Most people staring at screens are holding their bowling ball somewhere like that. So if your head weighs 8 pounds, it gets about 10 pounds heavier for every inch that it goes forward. So it goes from 8 pounds to 18 to 28 to so by the time you're looking down at a screen, you've got about a 40-pound bowling ball hanging off of your shoulders. And people wonder, why are my shoulders always so tight and stiff and sore? Well, it could be that. And then PMR is another thing that I use, not every day, but I try to do it every day. It's prayer, meditation, and reading. So when I get up in the morning, I get my coffee, I lay down on my foam roller, I do my little foam rolling exercise, do some of the breathing, and then I'll do like a prayer of the day. I've got the Bible app. You guys probably use different things, but I use that. I do like a little meditation, just take a minute just to kind of quiet my mind, sort of let everything relax, and then R would be reading. Just read something, doesn't have to be long, just a little bit of a routine to kind of get everything centered here so that I'm better out there. That make sense? And I'll tell you, the days I do that, which I need to do every day, but the days I do that, my day goes so much better, so much smoother, so much better. It's remarkable. So those are the stress response keys. And then some of these biomarkers. So if you go to your doctor and get blood work, you want to make sure that you go to a doctor that's measuring all those top 3 or top 4 anyway. So it's your fasting glucose. So you fast for 8 to 12 hours, and then you get your blood test in the morning. Your fasting glucose should be between 72 to 85. That's the ideal. But nowadays they tell people as long as you're below 100, you're fine. Well, 100 is on the doorstep of prediabetes. You get over 125, they tell you you're already diabetic. So you want to keep that between 72 and 55. And then your A1C is basically your 90-day average of blood sugars. That should be below 5.7 and preferably below 5.5. I like it closer to 5.2. That would be ideal. But they tell people, you're 5.6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, you're fine. You come back in 6 months, we'll check you again. Well, you're on the doorstep of diabetes, and they tell you just keep doing what you're doing, we'll check you again in 6 months. I mean, why would change not need to occur earlier versus later? And then, has anyone ever had a fasting insulin drawn? Some people have. It's not on the standard blood work. You almost have to ask for it or be going to a doctor that routinely runs those panels. They tell you as long as you're below 40 that you're fine. The current research now says you need to be between about 2 and 5 nanograms per deciliter. So you want that fasting insulin number to be really, really low. Because once your fasting insulin starts to shoot up, then you're going to see your fasting glucose shoot up, then you're going to see your A1C shoot up, and then you're going to see rates of diabetes and all those other diseases go up. You with me? And then your triglycerides, which is how much spills over the liver and gets into the bloodstream. We want that number below 100, ideally. So make sure you're getting all those checked. And then for your waist size is another great indicator. So you want to take your height in inches. Whatever your height in inches is, your waist size should be less than half of that. So if your height is 70 inches, let's say, your waist size should be less than 35 inches, ideally. So those are all the main indicators. And then these continuous glucose monitors, those CGMs, we see people walking around with those little stamps on the back of their tricep, those little circles. Those things are amazing. I wish they would give those out. Those should be standard issue really for anyone under regular medical care, because it tells you in real time what that pasta does to my blood sugar, and you can watch it. Like you'll eat a food that you thought was actually pretty healthy. I had peanut butter and a piece of whole wheat toast, and it shot up quicker than a Snickers bar. So you can actually see this. You don't have to wait to feel it and have disease, but you can actually see those numbers change in real time. So those are some of the markers, There's way more. We have some much more in-depth testing. We can give you a kit that does blood and urine and stool, or not stool. You can do that if you want. Blood, urine, and cheek swab. So you do a genetic cheek swab. If you do the stool test, that's a fun project, by the way. But anyway, blood, urine, and cheek swab, and it measures your antioxidant status, your B vitamins, your omega-3s, your gut dysbiosis, your toxic load, if you've got lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury. It kind of shows you where you stand. So it's measuring about 190 different biomarkers versus your standard blood test. So when you go to your doctor and they do all your lipids and your metabolic panel and your CBC, that's measuring about 19 different biomarkers. It's kind of a joke. Now, if you have active cancer or if you're anemic, that's probably going to show up on those markers. But they don't even routinely test vitamin D. They don't routinely test fasting insulin. It's just very, very incomplete because insurance will pay for that. And then, so the solution, because for most people, they need like a little bit of structure, they need a plan, they need something to follow with a little bit of accountability. We have a 6-week metabolic reset program, which is basically no drugs, so none of the shots, none of the expensive medications, no exercise. So can I get an amen for that? So in the first 6 weeks, we encourage you to stick with whatever exercise you're currently doing, or maybe wait a little bit to start adding exercise, because you don't want to start CrossFit the day that you start doing this program. It's just too much chaos for the metabolism. No prepackaged foods, no shakes, real food. So you're going to learn how to eat real food, how to buy it, how to prepare it. It doesn't take long. It's very simple, but you got to learn some of the basics. Otherwise, you can't eat shakes for the rest of your life. I guess you can, but you're not going to eat prepackaged Jenny Craig meals that come through the mail for the rest of your life. You're not going to do those packaged bars and shakes and foods, because you're basically just doing a short-term diet for the most part. We want to teach you how to do it forever. So basically it's doctor supervised, or we have Coach Jessica, which is way better than I am. So when you get these 3 manuals that give you like an instruction booklet, they give you a recipe book that gives you all the recipes, and then it gives you like a tracker, like a journal to write down what I ate, how I felt, how much water. It kind of tracks it throughout the day. And there's 2 different supplements. And with this program, there's three phases to the program. So it's 6 weeks, but the first 2 days is the loading phase. So for the loading phase, you're going to eat 5,000 calories a day for 2 days, which sounds like a party. Those are the 2 hardest days, by the way. It sounds fun, and I can do that in a heartbeat. When you're sweating through your 3rd bowl of cereal, it's harder than you think it is. And the science and the logic behind that is those first 2 days you're going to spike the metabolism because you're consuming so much caloric intake. You're dumping toxins out of the liver. You're getting the metabolism revved up. And then on day 3, we're dropping the bottom out of it. And then for 6 weeks, we're doing intermittent fasting with real food, protein, veggies, and fruit. It's basically how it works. And then the benefits, it helps to suppress appetite because your body's kicking into those ketones versus using sugar for fuel, the metabolic flexibility, boosted energy, burn more fat, supports leptin, fat cell reduction, healthy blood insulin levels. And the biggest thing too is it helps reestablish a new basal metabolic rate, or a new set point. Because most people have what's called a set point where they can lose 5 pounds and then they gain it right back. Or they can lose 10 pounds but they kind of get stuck. So that's because your BMI, your BMR has not reset. You're basically at a set point. So it helps to elevate and change that set point. And obviously it's safe and effective. 2 meals a day. So you typically do like a lunch and a dinner. You could do it different, but that's how most people do it. And it's lean protein, veggies, fruits, and there's actually bread, which if you can avoid the bread, it actually works a little bit better. But we'll show you what kind. Low glycemic, anti-inflammatory, and it's just real stuff that you buy at the grocery store. It's no fake stuff. You just buy chicken breast, you buy strawberries, you buy whatever. And a typical meal kind of looks like that. That doesn't have a lot of really, a typical meal looks more like that. Kind of looks like a healthy bowl at Chipotle, essentially. So you're getting a little bit of protein, you're getting some veggies, and then you get a little bit of fruit for dessert. And then you compare this to like Weight Watchers. Let me see here. Yeah, so the savings, and I need to update this because of inflation, But if you eat like one less meal a day, which who can get a meal for $5 anymore? Like that's impossible. We went to Chipotle the other day for 3 of us, and it was like $60. Like for Chipotle. Like, you kidding me? If you spend a bunch of 4 times a week, you're buying junk food, which again, you can't even buy junk food for $5 anymore. And then you're $4 less a day by not buying fast food process. I guess that's a kid's meal at McDonald's. So literally, most people save $500, $600, $700 during that program because they're not eating the Frappuccino, they're not going through the drive-through, they're not getting out of the vending machine. It saves money that way. So this is Rhonda. She, over her 6 weeks, she lost 23.4 pounds and lost 31 inches. And she was just in last week, and she's maintained. It's been a couple months since she graduated, and she's doing great. Paula, she did an incredible job. So she lost 37 pounds in 6 weeks. And that's not, you're not starving yourself. That's the thing. You're not tanking your metabolism and dying of starvation. You get through those first couple of days, your body starts to reset, and you're really not all that hungry as long as you stay pretty close to the program. Now, if you eat a couple Oreos, you're going to feel like you're back where you started. So you got to stay consistent with it. This is Bert. He lost 36 pounds, 21 inches in 42 days. The average weight loss for women is like 24 point something pounds, I think, 3 or 4. And for men, it's obviously more. Yeah, 30 is kind of the average. This is Michelle. She didn't even really need to do the program, but she did it because her husband needed to do it, and they kind of teamed up and did it together. She lost 18 pounds and 10 inches, improved sleep, energy, got rid of brain fog. And this is her husband right here. Eventually, that's Porter. That's the reason she did it. I remember she would come in for years, just in tears that her husband is sick. She doesn't want to lose him. He's sleep apnea. He's on medications. He's dying. She's watching him die, and she can't get him motivated. And she talked him into doing the program with her. And then I think he lost about 40 pounds, somewhere in that range. And that's been a couple years, and he's probably gained 5 or so of that back, but he's basically maintained and drinks his bourbon occasionally every now and then with the guys. And so once you go through this process, you got to put the work in for 6 weeks. Like, you got to buckle down, suck it up a little bit, and you got to do the work for 6 weeks. And then for the rest of your life, you can do the 80-20 thing. But we got to put the work in. We got to rewire the metabolism. We got to get the cells using ketones instead of sugar for fuel. Like, where there's a period of time we got to dial it in. And this is Sheila, 29 pounds and 29 inches, more energy, cognitive function, skin cleared up. And those are all just normal people, like normal people doing abnormal things. Nothing special about them. They just said, I'm ready to do it. They had the accountability, and they did it. So when we come in, we do this body composition scan. So it's 20 different biomarkers from body fat, weight, BMI, visceral fat, water, and it measures all those markers. And then when you come in once a week, we come in and scan you, weigh you, talk through everything, kind of see where you're at, answer any problems, frequently asked questions, all that. And so you have the accountability to keep this going long term. And then lastly, if you want to get that scan, you get signed up. Jessica, come here. Get over here. This is our in-house nutrition expert. She's the health coach. She's been doing this for 5 years, 6 years?
I can't keep up.
You even know?
That means I'm getting older, so I don't know. Yeah, several years. Dr. Ben, brought me on in this past year. So
We stole her.
getting acquainted with his clients and working with some of the sweetest, most amazing folks. So just watch their lives transform. Just had another couple, the gentleman lost 40 pounds in 6 weeks, and the wife lost 27. So
it's a man's world, isn't it?
it is. Now he had more to lose, so
Yeah.
a lot of times the more you have to lose, the more you will lose. But it's truly changed their lives, so that was just a really cool story. But yes, it's an honor to be here, and we walk through the questions, the concerns every week. You weigh in, you meet with me in the consult room over here. A lot of times you pair that with an adjustment with Dr. Ben. So we both get to see you, check in with you, go over recipes, your schedule, your sleep, your energy, how the supplements are going. if you have, any questions that need Dr. Ben's advice or help or recommendations, of course, I have him at my disposal, so we always consult with him as well. But it's just a really wonderful program, a transformation. So if you are interested, ready to do the work, dial it in, be intentional, I'm here Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays for consultations. So I'd love
Yep.
to
So yeah, you schedule that 20-point body composition. That's free, no cost for that. And she can explain the program, ask you what your goals are, explain what you're in for, and then get healthy. And then we do a 20-pound guarantee. So if you work the program, you do it good, you don't lose 20 pounds. If you have 20 pounds to lose, start there. And you don't lose the 20, then you do another round the other 6 weeks at no cost. So we want to see you get better. And we have some people that do it that just need to lose like 6 pounds, but they have eczema, or they have migraines, or they have fibromyalgia, or they have whatever, and they just want to get healthier. It's not really a weight loss thing. It's more, and the weight loss is really just a side effect. It's a side effect of getting healthy, getting metabolically flexible, increasing insulin sensitivity, fixing the cell internally, and then for most people, weight loss is a good icing on the cake.
It's a detox.
Detox, that's right.
Yeah, it's a reset. So if you want to get reset for the fall, come see me.
So imagine by Labor Day,
Yes.
right? Labor Day, 20 pounds, 20 plus pounds lighter, you feel better, sleep better, have more energy. Like that's what everybody gets when they go through the program. So, all right. Thank you guys.